Erik stood alone, facing two bullies who depended solely on their family's wealth and influence, lacking any real strength or personal qualities. Using agility and clever tactics, Erik swiftly defeated both of them, leaving them sprawled on the floor. The story rewinds 3 months earlier. A fork accidentally clattered to the ground, and immediately, the dinner atmosphere grew tense. Erik's stepfather didn't let the small incident go unnoticed. He closed the door behind him and proceeded to punish Erik with violence. His mother, fully aware of the situation, could only stand there helplessly. She convinced herself that the beatings would help Erik become more obedient. After each punishment, Erik had to pretend to reconcile with the man who had hurt him so deeply. Gradually, violence became a constant in his life, and with it, a growing resentment inside Erik, like an ember ready to ignite the simmering anger within him. Eventually, Erik's rage exploded into uncontrollable outbursts of violence. He regularly beat his classmates, even injuring them during his fits of fury. His reputation for aggression silenced everyone around him, and no one dared intervene. His fights became more frequent, and eventually, the principal could no longer tolerate his behavior. After a serious incident, Erik was summoned to the office, where the principal announced his expulsion, signaling the end of any tolerance for his misbehavior. His mother suggested he reach out to Gunnar, a lawyer friend of hers. Gunnar handed Erik his business card, telling him to call if he needed help. Erik could only hold the card, staring at it in silence. After Gunnar left, his mother openly expressed her disappointment about his expulsion. To Erik's surprise, she announced that she had enrolled him in Starburg, a prestigious all-boys boarding school. She emphasized that this was his last chance and hoped Erik would change and avoid repeating his past mistakes. Erik promised to work harder and not make the same errors again. He was determined to graduate without any further incidents. On his first day at the new school, dressed in a neat uniform with his hair cut short, Erik began his new journey. His roommate, Pierre, was known as the brightest student at the school. Fortunately, Pierre was friendly and easy to talk to, and they quickly became close friends. That evening, Erik and Pierre went to the dining hall for dinner. There, Erik met Johan, another student, who eagerly introduced him to the school's traditions. Johan explained that in this school, your treatment wasn't only based on your personality, but also heavily on your social standing. As Johan finished speaking, Erik noticed a student next to him being called out by two people sitting at the far end of the table. They were Otto and Alan, sons of wealthy aristocratic families, while the student being targeted came from a more modest background. Otto and Alan were notorious for bullying classmates from less fortunate families, using their family's influence to act without consequences. Their positions on the student council only reinforced their power, making it easier for them to enforce their will without any obstacles. After dinner, Pierre invited Erik to join him outside for a smoke. Although hesitant, Erik firmly declined, reminding himself of the promise he had made to his mother to follow the rules. Johan warned that if they got caught, the punishment would be severe. However, Pierre laughed it off, assuring Erik that they wouldn't be caught. Eventually, Erik gave in to Pierre's persuasion and reluctantly agreed. The next day, during breakfast, Otto and Alan approached Erik and demanded that he participate in a traditional initiation ceremony for new students. Erik refused, and this decision immediately angered Otto and Alan. Instead of retaliating against Erik, they focused on Johan, who became their next target. That evening, they orchestrated an attack, with a car intentionally crashing into Johan, leaving him seriously injured and hospitalized. Meanwhile, Otto and Alan continued plotting, this time targeting Erik. They summoned him to the student council's headquarters and ordered him to clean a pile of dirty shoes scattered across the floor. Erik refused and walked away, defying them. Enraged, Otto and Alan turned to discuss how to deal with Erik. They decided to wait for the right moment to act. After leaving, Erik went to find Pierre and shared everything with him. He was anxious and frustrated by the unfair situation. Pierre listened in silence, his face tense as he absorbed Erik's words. He sighed and warned Erik that confronting Otto and Alan was risky, as students who stood up to them typically faced brutal punishments. However, Erik, having been a bully himself in the past, scoffed at Pierre's advice. He confidently stated that he wasn't afraid of Otto and Alan and would never submit to them. Later that evening, the two friends sat together, brainstorming ways to stand up to Otto and Alan without resorting to violence. Unfortunately, all their efforts were in vain. Most students at the school preferred to obey, accepting humiliation, rather than risk facing painful beatings. The following morning, while walking down the hallway, Erik accidentally bumped into Delon. Instead of apologizing, Delon arrogantly demanded that Erik take responsibility and apologize to him. Erik, feeling that he wasn't at fault, refused. Delon, enraged, immediately challenged Erik to a fight at a designated location. That evening, Erik arrived at the meeting spot, bringing Pierre and Johan with him, just in case. Pierre repeatedly warned Erik that Otto and Delon were notorious for playing dirty and never fought fairly. They always involved their friends to overpower their opponents. Erik initially accepted Delon's challenge, ready to face him head-on, but as he recalled his mother's advice to focus on his studies and graduate without making mistakes, he changed his mind. In his room, Pierre tried to comfort Erik, helping him overcome his anxiety. Meanwhile, at the meeting spot, Otto, Delon, and their friends waited for hours, but Erik didn't show up. Otto, with a smug smile, declared that Erik was just a coward, too scared to face them. The next day, Otto publicly announced a list of students who had defied the student council, with Erik at the top of the list. In a mock trial, Otto, using his position as president, sentenced Erik to a month of hard labor, ordering him to dig a trench around the school. Erik worked through the night, sweat pouring down, but couldn't complete the task. He was forced to eat alone in an empty hallway. As he ate, Maria, a cafeteria worker, approached. She seemed intrigued by his story, which reminded her of her own brother, who had also been defiant and refused to bow to authority. After the meal, Maria unexpectedly appeared beside Erik again, advising him to take care of himself. What surprised Erik even more was when Maria kissed him on the cheek and embraced him tightly. They both knew that a relationship between a student and a staff member was strictly forbidden, with severe consequences if discovered. Erik could be expelled, and Maria would be immediately fired. Nevertheless, their moment together remained unforgettable for both of them. During the Christmas break, when Erik returned home, his mother greeted him warmly, but his stepfather was distant and cold, interrogating him about the punishments he had faced, including his suspension. Erik explained that he had refused to obey the orders of a student who was the son of a wealthy family at school. His stepfather argued that the son of a noble family deserved respect and obedience, criticizing Erik for his poor academic performance and the punishments he had received. Once again, Erik's stepfather beat him, and his mother, though clearly seeing her son's suffering, did nothing to intervene. After the Christmas break, Erik returned to school. The first thing he did was rush to find Maria, as he had missed her deeply during their time apart. Under the moonlight, they reunited and embraced each other, finding comfort in one another's arms. When Otto and Delon learned that Erik had returned to school, they immediately concocted a new prank. This time, they planned to pour dirty water on Erik while he was sleeping. However, their plan was thwarted. Erik and Pierre woke up immediately and cleaned up the mess that had been left behind. This time, Erik decided to seek revenge. Seizing the moment of silence, he snuck into Otto's room, turned off the lights, and poured dirty water on him while Otto was fast asleep. The next morning in the dining hall, Erik deliberately spoke loudly, making sure everyone could hear him. He took a deep breath and began walking around the room, pretending to follow a scent. Eventually, he stopped right in front of Otto, who was having breakfast. With a smirk, Erik called him filthy. Furious, Otto lost his composure because Erik had the audacity to humiliate him in front of everyone. Erik looked at him and loudly stated, "The princesses will be watching you when I'm out here. Do you understand?" Otto lunged forward and punched Erik. Despite the relentless beating, Erik stood his ground. He clearly remembered the promise he made to his mother to stay out of trouble. Meanwhile, the principal and teachers sat at a nearby table, calmly eating, as if they hadn't noticed what was happening. Witnessing this, Maria stepped in and moved toward Otto, asking him to stop. Despite her disappointment that Erik continued to endure without retaliating, Maria couldn't help but admire his resolve. Realizing they couldn't break Erik's spirit, Otto and Delon decided to shift their attention to Pierre, Erik's only true friend at the school. During lunch, Otto called Pierre over. However, Pierre firmly refused, stating that he hadn't done anything wrong to Otto. Otto was not one to back down easily. After school, he challenged Pierre to a confrontation, threatening him with severe punishment if he refused. Along with Alan, Otto intentionally targeted Pierre, provoking him in an attempt to drag Erik into the situation. They were confident that Erik wouldn't stand idly by while his best friend was being bullied. Their goal was clear: force Erik to get involved, knowing full well that no one at the school would dare oppose Otto and Alan's authority. That night, Pierre had no choice but to accept the challenge. He went to the designated battleground, where Delon and their gang had already gathered. Pierre understood that this battle wasn't just about defending himself, but also a test of his courage and resolve. Despite knowing he was facing a group that outnumbered and outpowered him, Pierre told himself he had to fight until the end, refusing to be intimidated by their threats. Pierre's strength seemed to drain as he was quickly overpowered by a light blow from Otto, and he collapsed to the ground. Erik couldn't believe what he was witnessing, his best friend lying motionless, humiliated and treated as though he were nothing. By the time Erik arrived, it was already too late. He could only carry Pierre back to their room and tend to his wounds. Once Pierre was stable, Erik urged him to rest and quietly left. Later that night, Erik sought out Maria to vent the frustration and helplessness that had been building inside him. The next morning, they received more threats from Otto's group. Worried about Pierre's condition, Erik rushed back to their room, unwilling to leave his friend for even a moment, now fully understanding that Pierre needed his protection. When Erik returned to the room, he was stunned to find it empty. Pierre had taken all of his belongings, leaving behind only a letter. In the letter, Pierre expressed his deep gratitude to Erik, calling him the only true friend he had ever had. He apologized for his decision to leave, but urged Erik not to give up. Pierre encouraged Erik to keep standing up against Otto and his gang, to end the cycle of injustice and cruelty at the school. The words in the letter sparked a fire inside Erik's heart, fueling his determination. He vowed not to let Pierre and those who had suffered be disappointed. For the first time, Erik realized his true mission, not just to avenge Pierre, but also to bring justice to all the students oppressed by Otto's ruthless hands. Without hesitation, Erik marched into the dining hall and confronted Delon. He declared that he would face Otto in the arena, determined to put an end to the days of oppression. An hour later, in the arena, Erik stood alone, facing Otto's strongest henchmen, Vaughn and Shannon. Despite their superior physical strength, both relied solely on the power and influence of their families, lacking true skill. Erik, with his agility and smart tactics, easily defeated both of them in an instant, leaving them sprawled on the arena floor. The atmosphere was silent as all eyes turned toward Otto, who was stunned by the defeat of his top henchman. Erik moved toward Otto, exuding confidence and challenging him. Before the final confrontation, Erik decided to seek encouragement from Maria in the school kitchen. However, when he arrived, a staff member informed him that Maria had been fired and had left the school. Her absence hit Erik hard, but it also made him more determined. He whispered to himself, "For all those who have suffered injustice, I cannot stop." A staff member quietly handed Erik a letter from Maria, just like how Pierre had left before. Holding the letter in his hands, Erik felt a deep sorrow for her departure. The letter contained Maria's final words, filled with blessings and wishes for Erik to stay strong. One of Otto's henchmen, who had seen Erik receiving the letter, quickly reported it to Otto. Shortly after, Otto and his accomplices stormed into Erik's room, showing no intention of hiding their motives. Otto ordered them to search through Erik's belongings. Eventually, they found the letter from Maria. He read each line aloud, and as he did, realized the secret the letter revealed: the relationship between Erik and Maria. This was his opportunity to punish Erik. Holding the letter up like a trophy, Otto declared that with this evidence, Erik could not escape expulsion. Otto rushed to the principal, presenting the letter as proof of Erik's misconduct. The principal quickly summoned Erik to his office, and after a brief review, announced his decision. Erik would be expelled for serious violations, particularly regarding his relationship with Maria. Faced with the punishment, Erik remained calm, accepting it without panic or resistance. However, before leaving, he requested the return of Maria's letter, the last memento he had left. The principal coldly refused, stating that the letter would be kept as part of the violation record and locked away in a drawer. Exiled and stripped of his friends and Maria, Erik felt as though everything had been taken from him. But it was this very pain that sparked a fire of determination within him. With everything Otto had caused, Erik knew he couldn't leave Starburg without settling things. With nothing left to lose, he was ready to face Otto, no matter the outcome. Following Otto's trail, Erik found him walking alone in a desolate forest. Confronting his enemy, Erik gripped a stick in his hand, his gaze cold and determined. He commanded Otto to kneel. Facing Erik's resolute attitude, Otto, who had always relied on power to oppress others, was stripped of his arrogance. Panicking, Otto shakily knelt, desperate. He pulled out $10,000 from his coat pocket, offering it to Erik as a bribe to save his life, but Erik refused. As Erik's anger continued to rise, Otto collapsed completely, crying and begging for forgiveness. He even vomited from fear. Witnessing this pitiful sight, Erik instinctively stopped. He knelt down, grasped Otto's face, and looked deeply into his terrified eyes, telling him he wouldn't kill him. Erik reminded Otto that he would not take pleasure in the suffering of others. These words felt like a declaration, not just for Otto, but also for Erik himself, affirming the kind of person he wanted to become. Leaving Otto behind, shaken and fearful, Erik returned to the school. He packed his belongings and prepared to leave, remembering Gunnar, the lawyer who had once told him to reach out for help if needed. Erik decided to contact Gunnar and explain the entire situation. Not long after, Gunnar arrived at Starburg, exuding the confidence of someone ready to fight for justice. After hearing Erik's story, Gunnar and Erik went directly to the principal's office. The principal, comfortably drinking and surrounded by faculty members, showed no sign of concern at Erik's appearance. Erik stood before him, pleading for a chance to stay at the school and requesting the return of Maria's letter. However, the principal flatly refused, stating that Erik did not deserve any leniency. At that moment, Gunnar stepped forward, advising the principal to reconsider his decision. He warned that if the principal didn't change his mind, Gunnar would not hesitate to expose the truth. The culture of class discrimination and bullying that the principal and staff had condoned. With no way out, the principal was forced to relent under Gunnar's pressure. He agreed to all of Erik's demands, including returning Maria's letter and disbanding the student council. This decision marked the end of an era of oppression at Starburg, bringing hope to the students who had long endured injustice. Erik felt deeply grateful to Gunnar, who had helped him not only protect his rights, but also contributed to changing the school's environment. Thanks to Gunnar's support, Erik not only continued his studies at Starburg, but also successfully overthrew the authoritarian regime that Otto and his supporters had established. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at the school became lighter and more peaceful. Erik poured all his energy into his studies and enjoyed his final time at Starburg. When he graduated, he left with pride and the admiration of many fellow students. Erik's mother was overjoyed by his accomplishments, proud of how he had overcome adversity. However, his stepfather remained unchanged, continuing to blame and criticize Erik for his actions at school. This time, Erik didn't let it affect him. He had proven that he was stronger than any judgment. When his stepfather raised his hand to strike him again, Erik was no longer afraid. Determined to stand up for himself, Erik declared that this would be the last time violence would appear in their home. Erik no longer wanted to live in fear and oppression. He decided to kick his stepfather out of the house, ending years of suffering. Over time, Erik began rebuilding his life. Eventually, he reunited with his close friend, who was about to leave for Geneva to continue his studies. They promised each other to keep in touch and meet again one day. For the first time in his life, Erik felt the weight of freedom and hope, knowing that a bright new future awaited him.